Welcome, everyone, to the Subcommittee on Natural Resources. Today is April 9th. It's a Tuesday. We're going to open up a public hearing on House Bill 5013, which is the Department of Fish and Wildlife budget bill. And we'll start off with Paul, if there's anything that we need to know for today. Paul?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, there's some responses at your places, and after the meeting, the committee assistant will post those onto OLS.
Great, thank you very much. And then
that's it.
I think that's back to you, Director.
Mr. Chair, Senator Edwards, Representative Bailey, appreciate the opportunity again today. As Paul said, we have responses back from the questions by committee yesterday, and I'd like to call up Mr. Bruce McIntosh, our Acting Fish Division Administrator, to take you through our Fish Division program.
Welcome. If you could identify yourselves for the record, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, Chair Unger and Chair Edwards, members of the committee. For the record, Bruce McIntosh, Acting Fish Division Administrator for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I also have Ed Bowles with me, who is the permanent Fish Division Administrator, but he's currently on assignment to the Director's Office working on Columbia River issues. We're going to tag team this talk a little bit. I'll handle the inland fisheries side of things, and Ed will handle the Columbia River and ocean sides. So we're here to talk today about the fish programs in the agency. As we note, ODFW is Oregon's fish managers, whether it's Director Elliker and staff sitting with Canada and Alaska working on the Pacific Salmon Treaty, or issues of the Columbia River Basin, or even the creeks that run through the backyard. We're the folks on the ground managing Oregon's fish. We operate from a framework where conservation is job one. We make decisions based on sound science, and we look to maximize the opportunities to implement fisheries. We also manage a large hatchery system. The system is in response to all kinds of habitat mitigation actions that have been taken over the millennia. In addition, about 70% of the fish that are caught in the freshwaters of Oregon are of hatchery origin. In addition, we advise on the habitat needs of fish with state agencies and other private interests. To give you an overview of the Fish Division, Fish Division itself oversees policy direction and the budget for the fish side of the agency, while our field programs are charged with implementing the policies. Over 90% of the FTEs in Fish Division are in the field. From an agency perspective, the fish program is about 60% of the budget and about 75% of the positions in the agency. As Director Elliker likes to say, we live in Salmon Nation. On the inland fisheries side, fisheries represents about 80% of the fish budget itself, and this is the freshwater programs that work on things. You'll see it up on the left there: native fish conservation, recreational fisheries management, water and energy coordination, along with managing our engineering and facility needs, and of course our hatchery program. The inland fisheries side of the agency is charged with providing policy direction for inland fisheries. As I said, conservation is job one, and we focus on how to protect and enhance Oregon's native species. At the same time, we manage the hatchery program consistent with conservation plans and our conservation mandate. At the same time, we continue to work to build opportunities for all kinds of fisheries, from sports and commercials to tribal fishers, again, consistent with our conservation mandate. Some of the issues and opportunities before the inland fishery side of things. We're coming to the end of about an era of conservation planning. We started in 2003 developing conservation plans for salmon and steelhead across the state. A real focus right now is the Willamette biop in the Willamette Valley, which is focused on the reintroduction of salmon and steelhead above the federal hydro system in the Willamette. In addition, we advise on water and hydropower issues, both to federal agencies and other state entities. We also are involved in energy development. We've worked on a task force associated with in-conduit hydro, and Senator Dingfelder's committee is in the process of working with that right now. And again, promoting fisheries is a huge emphasis of what we do, and I'll get into some more details of that later in the talk. As I noted, we are coming to the end of an era of conservation plan development. We have completed plans for about 90% of the salmon and steelhead species management units across the state, and those for all listed fish. So they range from up in the Snake all the way down to the California border. I will note that while we pride ourselves as a salmon nation, our first conservation plan was for a small and native lamprey species in Miller Lake in south central Oregon. I want to provide you with a couple of what we view as success stories on implementing conservation plans and headed towards the direction of delisting these species. We really view these conservation plans as blueprints to get to delisting and full restoration. The first I'll tee up for you is Oregon Coast Coho, which has had a long storied history both in the Oregon culture and in the legal world. Oregon Coast Coho, you'll see, were quite prior to the 90s, returned 350,000 or so fish to the Oregon coast. In the mid-90s, we saw Oregon Coast Coho plummet due to the effects of overharvest, hatchery impacts, habitat degradation, and ultimately the effects of poor oceans. At the turn of the millennium, the state had implemented conservative harvest and hatchery programs while investing in habitat restoration, and at the same time, Mother Nature started to shine on Coho again. And so through this last decade or so, we've now seen Coho return to levels we haven't seen since the 70s. A true success story for Oregon. We are now poised this coming fall to implement some modest sport and commercial harvests that we haven't seen for over 25 years. While there's still much to do related to Coast Coho, Oregon's got a great story to tell, and we will be working with NOAA Fisheries in the next few years on how to delist these species. Uh-oh. So you don't think that we forget the little guy. This is the story of Oregon chub, a small minnow that is native to the Willamette Valley. In the early 90s, this species was virtually eliminated from the Willamette. It was a small minnow found in the backwaters of the Willamette Valley. And with development and channelization and all the kind of things we've done in the Willamette, they were virtually extinct in the early 90s. With funding received from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we've had a small staff of biologists working with private landowners, federal interests, etc., to recover this species. As I noted, it was listed as an endangered species in 1993. Through our efforts with private landowners, it was downlisted to a threatened species in 2009, and in 2011 it met the delisting criteria for under ESA. So we are currently working with the Fish and Wildlife Service on a status review and efforts to delist this species. If we are successful in the next couple of years, this will be the first fish species delisted in the entire country. In addition, we implement a large fish screening and passage program. This is a collaborative program working with private landowners and other private interests such as hydropower, irrigation districts, etc., to over time get fish passage and screening across all the streams in the state. As I said, this is a collaborative program. On the screening side, we've implemented over 1,300 projects since 2000. We do this through a cost share program, which the state puts up 60% and the private party puts up the other 40%. At the same time, on the fish passage front, we have approximately 30,000 fish passage barriers across the state based on a legislative mandate to develop a priority list every 5 years. We recently completed one in February with our commission and identified about 2,600 priority fish passage sites across the state. This really helps our local biologists, other interest funding entities to prioritize where we get the biggest bang for our buck. In addition, we've implemented new technologies to manage these things. As you can imagine, many of them are in remote areas, so we've used solar power to power the screens and keep the batteries charged. At the same time, we've developed a lot of innovative screens that are self-cleaning and really reduce the need for human labor. Folks that sign up for these programs and work through this with us and develop and implement screens that meet current standards are therefore afforded ESA protection. Now, the program has been challenged.
One second. Senator.
Go ahead and finish this slide, and then I want to go back to another slide.
You bet. The program has been implemented, the Passage program under its current construct has been implemented since 2001 and screened since 1991. I know you're all aware of the challenges of fund shifts we've experienced collectively over the last decade or so. One of the challenges has been for the screening program with all the money coming from Pacific Coast salmon recovery dollars, which doesn't allow us to work in the Great Basin. So that's one of those challenges we continue to face with landowners in that part of the world.
Senator Edwards.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the conservation program slides, you gave us 2 examples, Coho and chub. What I'm wondering is how many conservation programs do you have? Secondly, how do you coordinate with other agencies in efforts to help recover species? Like, I mean, how do you coordinate with OWEB and prioritize, or help inform that process to prioritize projects? And then third, to what extent do efforts to recover one species tend to help others as well?
Chair Unger, Chair Edwards, great question. These plans, we have about a half a dozen of them across the state right now associated with salmon and steelhead. They cover a number of species. So in the lower Columbia, there are 5 species in that plan versus in the snake, there is 2. These plans were developed collaboratively with state agencies along with federal agencies, and for each one of these plans we had a stakeholder team, a public stakeholder team that was made up of citizen representatives from across the spectrum, from conservation groups to agricultural and timber interests. These, in most cases, were multi-species plans, so we were looking at the suite of needs of the species in that recovery domain. So a lot of actions were tailored to, again, get the biggest bang for the buck and make sure that we covered the whole gamut there and weren't going to have to come back around.
Federal ESA, they cover via federal ESA.
Yes, and a number of these plans were federal ESA plans, which we submitted to NOAA Fisheries, and they have all been approved by them since then.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to shift gears to our hatchery program. Our hatchery program is designed primarily to provide fisheries and fish for fishing at the end of the day to the public and commercial interests. We also have some programs that are designed purely for conservation, primarily in Northeast Oregon, where we have very low fish runs there. In addition, we aim for our hatcheries to be good residents in the watersheds they live in. So all these hatcheries discharge water, and we have discharge permits through DEQ, and we have to manage those so that we meet those permits. I can tell you that for 7 straight years now, we have not had a permit violation across the system. In addition, we're looking for our hatchery programs to be good neighbors to wild fish. This is dealing with the issues of the impacts of hatchery programs on wild fish, trying to keep the interactions low. And one of the investments the state made 8 years ago now was in the Hatchery Research Center, which has really been the focal point to do research on understanding the differences between hatchery and wild fish and how our practices might minimize the impacts of that. I will say that the Hatchery Research Center in a very short time has done a very effective job at getting at some of these key questions. One of the things that Senator Dingfelder raised yesterday was a question of what have we done to deal with energy use at hatcheries. We've provided some information to you. I'll just touch on those briefly. One of the things we did in the last biennium was we actually closed a hatchery. We closed the Butte Falls hatchery down out of the Rogue Basin. We had had some challenges with infrastructure and operations there, and we basically were able to transfer that production to other facilities, therefore being efficient in what we're doing and being able to close the facility down. One of the things we noted yesterday was we had implemented in-conduit hydro at our Oak Springs hatchery. We had gotten funds from the ERA Act from the federal government, and we're able to implement that. That's reducing our power bill there by about $25,000 a year. We have some other facilities where that's a possibility, but we are currently looking for opportunities to fund those types of things. We've done other things as well as that with implementing different kinds of pumping systems that are more efficient in terms of using energy. And again, we've seen in a number of sites reductions from $10,000 to $20,000 a year in our power usage. Water conservation is obviously a critical element to that, and so we're evaluating and bringing in new technologies that again reduce the use for water when you raise fish. And then finally, we move a lot of fish around the state and stock them all over the place. We really have worked hard to be as efficient as we can on that and really reduce the number of miles trucks are on the road.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you be prepared to, on Thursday, I anticipate that Representative Krieger will come and testify about some of his concerns about the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. I don't know the answers to those questions. I presume that you folks have an opinion. I know it's not just you guys, it's also Oregon State University. It's a fabulous facility. I mean, as far as what you're able to do there, one of my most interesting field trips that I've taken since being in the legislature was with Senator Walker when she chaired this committee to the Oregon Hatchery Research Center, and it was spent like 6 hours there, just downloading all the information I could about fish, except where and how to catch them, and it was really interesting. But I know Representative Krieger does have some concerns, and I've met with him about those, and I don't know how to how to answer his concerns. So if you could be anticipating that, and I don't know if there'll be time on Thursday to provide a response, but at some point in the coming weeks, be prepared to provide a response to the committee. That'd be helpful.
Chair Unger, Chair Edwards, we'd be glad to do that. We've been working actively with the representative to work through that, and I think we're on the path to finding a solution.
Great.
Thank you.
Can we go back one slide too? And at the end of the fish screen slide here, it notes down here that it's related to the performance measure number 6, unscreened water diversions. Can you tell us a little bit about how we're doing versus our goals when it comes to, I'm assuming that we have, looking at the larger budget package, which I haven't done, that we have a goal for how many unscreened water diversions we're taking care of each year. Can you just share with us how we're doing on that performance measure?
Be glad to, Chair Unger. I don't have the measure in front of me, but I can tell you that since we began implementing that measure in, I believe, 2000, we're on track to meet those annual targets for reduction in screens or the volume of water screened. We'd be glad, I think it may be in the package, but we'd be glad to share that with you.
I'm sure it's in the longer package, but...
so the short answer is we're on track.
Okay, great. That's all I want.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This map you've seen before just depicts where our hatcheries are located across the state. We currently manage 32 fish hatcheries. 18 of these are mitigation hatcheries, which means they were funded to deal with lost habitat or lost production from things like main stem dams on the Columbia River, the federal hydro system in the Willamette, the Soda Springs Dam on the North Umpqua, or even the City of Portland's own Bull Run Reservoir as part of a mitigation agreement. You can see there is a mix of funding types around these hatcheries. About 2/3 of the funds that operate this program come from the federal government. We release about 45 million fish per year. You can see the numbers there among the different species, and approximately 36 million of those are marked so that when they do return to the fisheries, we're able to harvest them. I think from our perspective, our hatchery program offers a very high return on the dollars we invest. Currently, over 650,000 people per year purchase fishing licenses annually. This translates into about 8 million fishing days per year. And Oregon's one of those unique places where you can go fishing 365 days a year. There are multiple opportunities, including ice fishing. In terms of a return on our investment, for every dollar spent, our evaluation is that it generates about $15 in economic benefit. That translates into about $900 million a biennium in travel expenses, equipment, and commercial fisheries associated with hatchery salmon, steelhead, and trout. And of every dollar that's spent, the state invests about a quarter on that. Hatcheries are also a very important part of Oregon's culture. Almost 1.5 million tourists visit our hatcheries per year. Just to give you some context for that, the Bonneville Hatchery up on the Columbia River receives about 400,000 tourists a year, whereas Crater Lake is about 480,000. In addition, we have a tremendous volunteer base around our hatchery. You can see some statistics there of the number of people that contributed almost 100,000 hours of time to helping support our hatchery system, which translates into approximately $2 million of real contribution to the program. Shifting here to recreational fisheries, as Director Elliker touched on yesterday, we've been investing a lot of time and effort and resources into how do we promote recreational fisheries with a significant focus on youth and families. We modified some of our licenses to make those more amenable to juveniles. We also are working on the recruitment and retention side, which is really about securing your base. We've provided a lot of information on making fishing accessible, easy, and ultimately affordable, with a real focus on family fisheries. One of the things we did this year was we made the dates of free fishing weekend and free camping weekend at state parks line up going forward. And we're actually doing events at those this year to see if we can connect people who are already there camping. We can do the training on how to fish, provide the fish and the gear to do that, and see how that translates. I can tell you from our evaluations of just the family fishing programs last year, it's translated into the majority of people actually going out and buying a license afterwards, spending money on gear and going fishing again. So our survey results are encouraging on that. In addition, we've integrated the private hatchery system for trout into our program, sort of serving as a farm system and doing what they do best to feed into our system and enhance our hatchery trout programs. We've also put a significant amount of effort into the restoration of a lot of our reservoir and lakes around the state that have been impacted by exotic species in a number of cases.
Senator Thompson.
Co-Chair Unger, thank you. I remember a couple of years ago we talked about the private trout purchases program, and I think back then I remember some of the issues were it's really hard for these people to have a kind of a plan in their business because they never know how many fish you're going to purchase because you're also in that business. So have you guys progressed in that and been able to work with them better to where they're able to plan on how many fish you guys might use from them?
Co-chairs Unger and Edwards and Senator Thompson, yes, we have. We sort of got out of that sort of lag effect and got a plan in place and now project out and actually get the contracts in place for the full biennium. So I guess my phone hasn't been ringing with complaints, so I'm pretty confident that things are working pretty well.
Thanks.
Another part of our program is fishing access. Always a challenge out there, private lands, trying to make sure we maintain access. We put a lot of resources into that through federal sport fish restoration dollars in coordination with the Marine Board. And this relates, all these activities relate to our KPM2 on increasing angling license purchases. We've also made some investments in technology. We've developed these fishing location maps, which for each region of the state, which show where we stock, what we stock, and when we stock, primarily trout. We implemented this in December of 2012, and it's been a very popular site. We've logged over 400,000 visits to that site since we implemented it late last year. Talk a little bit about our Restoration and Enhancement program. This is funded with a surcharge on recreational fishing license and commercial salmon fishery dollars. Since the legislature put this in place in 1989, it has funded over $46 million of projects and literally thousands of projects. Just kind of a brief summary for the current biennium. As of December, we, through the R&E Board and the Commission, have approved 115 projects. 24 of those, for a total of about $5 million. 26 of those have gone to help our hatchery system, 14 have gone to habitat restoration, 12 to education, and another 20 to research, monitoring, and evaluation. The other beauty of this program is match. It's about a 2-to-1 match of public and private dollars through the implementation of this program. And last but not least is our water program, which works with state, federal, local, and private tribal interests on how we balance the needs of fish and wildlife with the needs for water. We have programs working on in-stream water rights, hydropower relicensing, and then technical assistance to the variety of publics and privates out there advising on the water interests. We've also been very involved in the Columbia River water deliberations that have gone on, well, really for decades now, but a lot of focus through Oregon Solutions this last biennium. And then finally, I'll just speak to the Integrated Water Resource Strategy. We were one of the primary agencies, along with Water Resources and a couple others, in developing this effort over the last 2 years. Our focus in the governor's budget ask associated with this program is really restarting our in-stream water rights program. We filed our last in-stream water right in 1997, largely because there was literally 1,000 protests on the books, and we've spent the last decade working with Water Resources and others to resolve those protests. Based on our evaluation right now, there are about 400 priority in-stream water rights across the state, of which 300 of those need new flow studies to basically figure out the needs of fish and wildlife and then file for that. The proposed funding associated with this will allow us to develop about 30 of these a year and take roughly a decade to complete the process. I don't know why. Is it because it's over?
Yeah, it's on the pictures.
Oh.
We'll just do that.
And then I'll just finally touch briefly on our policy option packages. The majority of the packages that are in our budget are for largely ongoing programs, funding of fish hatcheries through the federal government, a significant program associated with fish research and monitoring that the federal government also funds, and then of course the new initiative associated with the water strategy that I just talked about. So at this point I'm going to turn it over to Ed Bowles unless you have additional questions.
Ed, keep going.
Co-chairs, members of the committee, once again, my name's Ed Bowles, the Fish Division Administrator, but on special assignment with the Director's Office. And so, as Dr. McIntosh mentioned, I'm going to just touch on the other half of the Fish Division, which is the Marine and Columbia River programs. And in general, I'd like to start with just, I guess, sharing with you, basically Oregonians have 4 primary expectations for their fish. First one is really to have fresh fish in their markets and restaurants. Another one is to be able to cast a line and experience the thrill of the bite. Another is to have these fish be major contributors to the Oregon economy and our culture. And then also to have these fish representing healthy native fish stocks as part of Oregon's ecological wealth. And this last point is expected for us to accomplish this while also sustainably managing these within the fabric of other land use, water use, and societal uses across the landscape. So no small challenge, and the staff of the Marine and Columbia River program are really the scientists and managers on the front lines for this real-time fish management that's occurring to make this a reality for the ocean and the river. Before I get into the program itself, I just share with you a few of the policy issues and opportunities and challenges that provide the backdrop for fish management in the Columbia River and Ocean. And this provides some context for the rest of the presentation. Of course, Bruce talked about the recovery and conservation mandate, which also is very evident in the Columbia